For the last decade, radiologists have been living in a kind of golden age. They're the highly trained specialists reading our MRIs and CT scans, and as imaging technology got better, the demand for their skills just exploded. More scans, more complexity, more work. And with a fixed number of experts, their salaries kept climbing past $300,000 a year. It was the perfect picture of a secure, high-end profession. But here's the unsettling irony. That constant, massive stream of digital images that made their jobs so lucrative, it also happens to be the perfect training data for an AI. The same tech industry that built the machines creating the boom is now building the algorithms to replace the experts. To those innovating in the tech sector, a field with digital inputs, clear outputs, and a $300,000 price tag isn't a profession, it's a problem to be solved, a market to be disrupted. And when a Stanford study proves their AI can already outperform a human on certain diagnoses, you realize the light in that golden age is starting to turn crimson.
Wow. That story about the radiologists, it really sets the stage, doesn't it? It's not just some isolated case.
No, not at all. It's actually a really vivid snapshot of what we're going to get into today.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. This deep dive, it's all about exploring these huge technological forces, AI, obviously, but also the gig economy and how they're, well, fundamentally reshaping work, jobs, wealth, right across the U.S.
Yeah, how they're impacting the middle class, how wealth is distributed. These are massive shifts.
Massive. And we're going to tackle some big questions, like what does this actually mean for economic equality?
And how vulnerable are different jobs? Which ones are resilient?
Right. And maybe the biggest one. What are the ethical responsibilities here for the tech companies, the leaders driving all this change?
It's complex, definitely. There are so many layers.
But that's what we're here for, right? To try and make sense of it for you.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, going back to the radiologists, is that it's not just one story. It's a symptom, maybe.
A microcosm.
Exactly. A microcosm of these much bigger, long-term shifts happening everywhere. These aren't just small tweaks for efficiency.
No, it feels bigger than that.
It is. It's a fundamental reconfiguration. And we need to look beyond just the cool new tech,
Understand the consequences.
The real economic consequences, the societal implications. How does it affect people, communities, the structure of society itself? We have to look at those ripple effects.
That phrase you use, the crimson tide for radiologists, it really sticks. It feels like a good metaphor for this larger shift in wealth distribution in the U.S.
It does capture that sense of something powerful and maybe a bit ominous washing over established structures.
Yeah, like the tide is turning and maybe not everyone's boat is rising with it.
That's a good way to put it. Because when you connect AI and advanced tech to the bigger economic picture, the link to growing inequality becomes, well, pretty hard to ignore.
You mentioned research on this.
Yes, quite a bit. For example, there was a 2023 study that came out. I think it was in the World Journal of Advanced Research and Reviews, WJAR.
Okay.
Maud Aver and colleagues. They essentially drew a direct line between AI adoption and wealth concentration.
So more AI means more wealth at the very top.
The data suggests a strong correlation.
Yeah.
A statistically significant one, looking at the share of wealth held by the top 1%.
How does that actually work? What's the mechanism?
Well, think about automation. David Otter wrote about this back in 2015. It's kind of a paradox.
Okay.
AI-driven automation is brilliant at replacing tasks that are routine, predictable, things humans used to do, often in middle-skill jobs, assembly lines, data entry, that kind of thing.
The jobs that used to be the backbone of the middle class.
Yeah, have to get those. But, and here's the other side of the coin, it also creates new, highly specialized roles.
For the tech people, the specialists.
Precisely. So you get this dual effect, overall productivity goes up, which sounds good. But you also see a depletion of those low and mid-skilled jobs, which can widen the gap between the skilled and the less skilled workforce.
And some argue this concentration goes even further, right? Not just skills, but corporate power.
Definitely. Shoshana Zuboff argued this in 2019. The promise is often that AI spreads opportunity, but the reality, she argues, is that it concentrates control.
Control in the hands of
a few dominant tech companies. Think Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Kaplan and Heinlein pointed this out too. They've built these colossal fortunes.
Yeah, you see the headlines.
But that wealth is heavily concentrated among executives, early investors, shareholders. There's a huge gap between them and their average employees, let alone the general public.
And they maintain that dominance.
Often through what's called monopolistic control. They dominate key markets. Cloud, search, e-commerce, making it incredibly hard for new competitors to break in.
So it stifles new avenues for wealth creation outside their orbits.
That's the argument. It deepens inequality by locking down the market.
Is there hard data on this wealth concentration beyond the anecdotes?
Oh, yes. That WJIR study I mentioned, they did a regression analysis using IRS tax data from 2006 to 2021.
And found
A strong positive correlation, R equals 0.82, highly significant between AI adoption rates in industries and the wealth share of the top 1%.
Wow, 0.82 is a strong correlation.
It really is, and it holds up when you look sector by sector. Industries heavy on AI software, fintech, digital services show much greater wealth disparities
Compared to
less automated sectors like, say, agriculture or hospitality. The gap is noticeably smaller there.
Can you put some numbers on that growth difference? It helps make it real.
Sure. Take the period between 2010 and 2021. The wealth of the top 5 U.S. tech billionaires. It grew by roughly 250%.
250%.
Yep. From about $150 billion to something like $525 billion combined.
Okay. And what about the average American household during that same time?
The median U.S. household wealth, so the midpoint, it grew by only about 10%.
10% versus 250.
Exactly. From around $93,000 to $102,000.
Yeah.
It starkly shows that divergence.
That is stark.
And you see it in things like the Gini coefficient, too, the standard measure of inequality. High AI sectors like finance and tech often have Gini coefficients over 0.5.
Which means higher inequality.
Much higher.
Yeah.
Compare that to sectors like education or healthcare, which are generally below 0.4. It suggests technology adoption isn't just changing how we work, but fundamentally who reaps the rewards.
So, okay, what does this all mean for you listening at home? It means these aren't just abstract numbers we're throwing around.
Not at all.
They reflect real shifts on the ground. Who's benefiting from tech progress? Where is the money actually going?
It's rewriting the rules of economic opportunity, potentially creating a much more stratified society. The old paths to prosperity seem to be narrowing, while a new, perhaps more exclusive path opens up for those at the very top, especially in tech.
Okay, so we have this picture of wealth concentrating at the top. Let's zoom in now on the jobs themselves, particularly this idea of the hollowing out of the middle.
Right, the concept of job polarization.
Yeah, Nir Jaimovich and Henry Sue read about this for Brookings back in 2019. They talked about a really pronounced drop in middle wage jobs.
Over decades, too, not just a recent blip.
Exactly, for like the last 40 years. And the growth is all happening at the high-end, high-wage jobs and the low-end, low-wage jobs, leaving this gap.
Shrinking middle.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So what kind of jobs are we actually talking about here? What's disappearing and what's growing?
Well, this raises an important question about the tasks involved. The key distinction economists make is between routine and non-routine tasks.
Okay, routine versus non-routine. What's the difference?
But routine tasks follow well-defined linear structures or procedural routines. Think predictable, repetitive steps.
Things a machine could easily learn.
Exactly. These were the jobs often found right in the middle of the wage distribution. Classic middle-class jobs.
Like factory work, clerical work.
Yes. Machine setters, operators, data entry, administrative support. Stable jobs, often with decent pay and benefits, that form the bedrock for many families. These are the jobs highly susceptible to automation.
Okay, so that's routine. What about non-routine?
Non-routine tasks require things like flexibility, creativity, problem solving, or complex human interaction.
Things machines aren't so good at yet.
Right. Much harder to automate. And these tasks are found at both ends of the pay scale.
Both ends? How so?
At the high wage end, you have non-routine cognitive jobs. These need abstract thinking, complex decision-making, managing people. Think managers, doctors, engineers, scientists, the AI specialists themselves.
Got it. High skill, high pay.
Generally, yes. And then at the low wage end, you have non-routine manual jobs. These often rely on physical dexterity, situational adaptability, and direct human interaction or care.
Like service jobs.
Exactly. Food service, cleaning, childcare, elder care, landscaping. These jobs require a human touch, empathy, adaptability in unpredictable physical environments, things current AI struggles with.
So the middle, the routine jobs, get squeezed, while the top and bottom, the non-routine jobs, expand.
That's the pattern. If you visualize employment share changes, say from 1980 to 2005, it looks like a U-shape.
Right.
Growth at the low and high ends, and this hollowing out in the middle.
Is there specific data showing that decline in the middle more recently?
Yes. Figures from 2002 to 2017 show about a negative 13.5% change in the employment share of routine jobs, a big drop.
13.5% down.
Sure.
And the non-routine jobs.
Non-routine cognitive jobs saw roughly a plus of 14.2% change in their share. strong growth. And non-routine manual jobs also grew, propping up the low end.
So it's a really fundamental restructuring of the labor market.
Absolutely, not just minor adjustments.
And there's something interesting about when these middle-tier routine jobs disappeared, isn't there? Something about recessions.
Yes, that's a critical point from the research. A huge chunk, something like 88% of the losses in routine jobs between the late 60s and 2017 happened during, or very close to, official recessions.
So downturns accelerate the automation push. Companies cut costs by replacing routine labor with machines.
That seems to be the pattern. Recessions act as a catalyst for adopting labor-saving technology.
But here's the kicker, right? Unlike in the past.
Exactly. Before the late 1980s or so, those routine jobs tended to bounce back when the economy recovered. People got laid off, but eventually many were rehired into similar roles.
But not anymore.
Not really. Since the late 80s, those routine job losses during recessions have largely been permanent. They don't come back.
Which leads to these jobless recoveries we hear about.
Precisely. The overall economy might grow, GDP goes up, but the jobs, particularly those middle-skill routine jobs, just aren't there anymore. It breaks that traditional link between economic recovery and broad-based job growth.
Leaving people stranded.
It can, yeah. The path back to stable, middle-class employment gets much harder or disappears entirely for some. And tracing where those displaced workers actually end up is, well, it tells a story about skills and opportunities.
So where do they go? Does it depend on the worker?
It does seem to. The research suggests workers who had higher abilities or perhaps better underlying skills within those routine jobs. They're significantly more likely to transition upwards.
Upwards into
Those higher-paying, non-routine cognitive jobs. They manage to reskill, leverage their experience, and make the jump.
But that's not everyone.
No, not by a long shot. Workers who were perhaps lower skilled within the routine category, or maybe faced other barriers, they are more likely to move downwards.
Downwards into the low-wage service jobs.
Into those non-routine manual or service occupations, yes. Which often means lower pay, fewer benefits, less stability than their previous job.
So it reinforces that U-shaped polarization we talked about.
Directly, it pushes people towards the poles of the wage distribution.
And the wages themselves reflect this.
Clearly, the wage premium for routine work, how much more it paid compared to non-routine manual work, actually fell by about 17% between the mid-70s and 2007.
So doing routine tasks became less valuable economically.
Significantly less valuable. Meanwhile, the wage premium for those non-routine cognitive jobs, it increased by about 25% over a similar period.
A huge divergence. Creates a strong push to upskill, but a big penalty if you can't.
Exactly. The market signals are very clear.
What about the demographics? Who is most affected by these disappearing routine jobs?
That's also quite revealing. A lot of the decline isn't just layoffs, it's about inflows. Fewer young people are entering these routine jobs in the first place.
The entry-level paths are closing off.
It seems so, especially for those in their 20s and early 30s. The traditional first rungs on the ladder aren't there.
And does it affect men and women differently?
Yes, there are patterns. Routine manual job losses think machine operators have disproportionately affected young and prime-age men, particularly those with lower levels of education, like a high school diploma or less.
Those traditional blue-collar jobs.
Right. And routine cognitive losses, like secretaries, clerks, have primarily affected young and prime-aged women, often with intermediate education, maybe high school, plus some college or vocational training.
So specific groups are really feeling the brunt of this.
Yes. And these demographic groups account for a large part of the fall we've seen in overall U.S. labor force participation and employment rates since the late 80s. It's not random, it's concentrated.
And just to reiterate, the growth we do see at the low end
is almost entirely driven by those low-wage service jobs, food service, cleaners, childcare, home health aides. Essential work, absolutely, but often precarious and low-paying.
Okay, this paints a really clear picture of what's happening, this polarization, the vanishing middle. But why? What's the main culprit? Is it technology, like automation and AI? Or is it globalization, offshoring, trade competition?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the consensus among economists, based on a lot of research, points primarily towards technology. Specifically, this idea of routine biased technical change, or RBTC.
Routine biased, meaning technology is biased towards replacing routine tasks.
Precisely. Industrial robots, computers, IT systems, they're fantastic at automating tasks that are repetitive and can be easily codified. They're less good or currently unable to replicate non-routine tasks effectively.
Like the landscaper versus the production line worker, or the doctor versus the data entry clerk.
Exactly. Non-routine cognitive work, like the doctor's diagnosis, and non-routine manual work, like the landscaper's adaptability, are harder for machines to substitute. Routine work is the easy target.
Is there specific evidence showing technology's impact over trades?
There is quite a few studies. For instance, Michaels, Natraj, and Reenan looked at ICT investment across 11 countries from 1980 to 2004.
ICT being information and communication technology.
Right. They found ICT investment boosted the income share of high-skill workers, reduced the share of middle-skill workers, and had little effect on low-skill workers. That strongly suggests IT favored the top and squeezed the middle.
Okay, that's IT. What about robots?
Good question. Grates and Michaels look at industrial robot adoption across many countries from 1993 to 2007. Robot density shot up over 150%.
And the impact?
It significantly increased labor productivity, making factories more efficient. But the impact on wages was much smaller, sometimes even negative for some workers.
So the benefits went more to the owners, the companies, than the workers.
That's what the evidence suggests. The productivity gains didn't translate fully into wage gains. And other research, like Asimoglu and Restrepo's work on U.S. local labor markets, found that each new robot was linked to about 3 to 6 fewer jobs in that area.
A direct displacement effect.
Yes. And even tax policies matter. Tissel and Zhang found that tax incentives for buying equipment led firms to cut routine workers over the next few years.
So the evidence for technology's role seems pretty strong.
It's quite robust, yeah.
What about the globalization argument then? Offshoring, trade with countries like China, doesn't that play a role?
It certainly plays a role in the economy, no doubt. But its role specifically in job polarization seems less central, according to many studies. There was a famous study by Goose, Manning, and Salomons covering 16 European countries. They called it a horse race between automation and offshoring potential.
And who won the race?
Technology. They found a strong negative link between how routine a job was and its employment growth. But how offshoreable a job was, that had almost no effect once you controlled for how routine it was. RBTC won, as they put it.
Interesting. But what about specific trade impacts, like competition from China? We hear a lot about that.
Right, and Otter, Dorn, and Hansen did important work on that. They found that U.S. areas more exposed to Chinese imports did see lower manufacturing, employment, and participation. So trade competition had real negative impacts, especially in manufacturing. But they also noted that automation's negative effects were more directly targeted at those middle-skill occupations and were spread across many sectors, not just manufacturing. So while trade hurt specific sectors, automation seemed to be the broader force hollowing out the middle across the economy.
Okay, one more piece of evidence, something about the U.S. and Mexico.
Oh, yes. Cortez and Morris looked at job changes in both countries.
Yeah.
If U.S. jobs were just being shipped to Mexico, you'd expect jobs declining in the U.S. to be rising in Mexico, right? A negative correlation.
Makes sense.
But they found a positive correlation, especially for routine manual jobs. These jobs were declining in both countries at the same time, suggesting a common cause, most likely the adoption of similar routine task-replacing technologies in both places, rather than just jobs moving south. It points to automation as a global trend impacting these roles everywhere.
Okay, so technology, particularly automation targeting routine tasks, seems like the primary driver of that hollowing out. But there's another huge shift happening in parallel, right? The gig economy.
Absolutely. It's a different kind of disruption, but definitely related, often enabled by the same digital platforms.
How would you define the gig economy simply?
Jining Wang's recent research described it as based on temporary agreements and independent employment. It's fundamentally changing that traditional employer-employee relationship.
We all know the big names: Uber, Airbnb, Upwork, delivery apps.
Right, and the promise or the pitch is often about enhanced freedom and prospects for entrepreneurship. Be your own boss, set your hours.
But there's a flip side.
A significant flip side. Major concerns about stability, benefits, worker protections, how labor laws even apply.
What's the core issue there?
This raises an important question, maybe the central battleground. Worker classification. Are gig workers independent contractors or employees?
Why does that distinction matter so much?
It matters hugely. Independent contractors have autonomy, yes, but they bear all the costs and risks, taxes, insurance, retirement, no paid time off. They lack conventional employment perks and legal safeguards.
And employees?
Employees are legally entitled to minimum wage, overtime, unemployment insurance, workers' comp, protection against discrimination, a whole suite of benefits and protections. But platforms generally classify their workers as contractors.
And that classification is often disputed.
Constantly.
Well,
It varies by location, by specific laws, and it's led to this problem of hybrid or misclassified workers. People are treated like employees in terms of control, but classified as contractors to avoid costs and responsibilities.
which leads to legal battles.
Endless legal battles, regulatory fights, legislative attempts. It's a massive point of contention globally because the stakes for workers are incredibly high.
Talk more about those impacts on workers. What are the big concerns beyond classification?
Well, job security, or rather the lack of it. It's built on short-term contracts, project-based work. There's an inherent absence of stable employment.
Constant uncertainty.
Exactly. Then there's the benefit disparity. A huge number of gig workers lack basic things like health insurance, retirement plans, paid sick leave, unemployment benefits. This really raises questions about our social safety nets. What happens when these workers get sick or face an economic downturn?
They're left incredibly vulnerable.
Very much so. Income stability is another big one. Pay can fluctuate wildly based on demand, platform algorithms, competition. There's no guaranteed salary, making financial planning incredibly difficult. Financial uncertainty is the norm for many.
And enforcing basic labor rights like minimum wage or safe conditions.
That's complicated too. The lack of a clear employer-employee relationship, plus the rise of algorithmic management where software dictates tasks and pay, makes it hard to enforce rules or even know who to hold accountable.
It sounds pretty bleak for workers trying to organize or bargain collectively.
It presents huge challenges, definitely. Workers are often isolated, there's no traditional workplace, the legal status is murky, and negotiating with an algorithm is tricky.
But are there any opportunities for collective action? Are workers finding ways?
Yes, interestingly. The same digital platforms that create the isolation can also be tools for connection. Online forums, social media groups allow workers to share information and coordinate.
So using the tools against the system, in a way.
Sort of. Plus, you have advocacy groups providing legal aid and support. New models are emerging, like worker cooperatives or alliances.
And public pressure.
Public attention is growing, leading to policy debates. And some gig workers are linking up with traditional unions, trying to leverage their power and resources. So while the hurdles are massive, workers are adapting and finding ways to push back. It's quite dynamic. Tag the fallacy of creative destruction.
That makes sense. Workers adapting to the new realities. Now, I want to shift gears a bit and bring in a more provocative idea about how we even think about all this disruption. We often hear the term creative destruction, right?
Ah, Schumpeter. Yes, the idea that capitalism is constantly renewing itself, that new technologies disrupt old industries, leading to bankruptcies, but then a boom.
Exactly. And the mainstream view is usually that this, while maybe painful for some in the short term, is ultimately good for the economy. It makes things more efficient, leads to progress.
It's often presented as the necessary price of innovation and long-term prosperity.
But there's a critique of this idea.
A pretty fundamental one, yeah. Himanshu Juneja wrote a piece called The Fallacy of Creative Destruction.
A fallacy? What's the argument?
Juneja argues the theory basically confuses cause and effect.
How so?
Instead of technology driving the boom and bust, he suggests it's often the other way around. The general boom that creates technological changes and market disruptions.
So easy money and economic expansion come first, then the disruption.
That's his core argument. He contrasts genuine innovation funded by real savings, accumulated capital from productive activity, with innovation funded by credit creation.
Money created out of thin air.
That's the phrase he uses. In modern economies, especially with fiat currency, central banks and commercial banks can expand credit easily. This flood of credit, not real savings, fuels irrational exuberance.
Like bubbles.
Exactly. And this easy credit, he argues, leads to wrong price signals. Prices are supposed to guide investment rationally, but distorted prices send capital in the wrong directions. Towards solving wrong problems or malinvestments. Resources get poured into ventures that aren't actually sustainable or economically vital just because cheap money makes them look good temporarily.
So the destruction part might not be clearing the way for something better, but might just be the inevitable collapse of unsustainable credit-fueled projects.
That's the essence of the critique. The theory of creative destruction in this view becomes a way to put a positive spin on cycles that might actually be driven by artificial credit booms and busts, rather than pure productive innovation. It makes the disruption seem natural and beneficial when it might be partly artificial and wasteful.
Wow. That's a really different way to look at it. So what does this mean for today's tech disruptions if this critique has merit?
Well, it challenges that narrative that tech-driven job losses and inequality are just unavoidable growing pains on the road to a better future.
It forces us to ask if all this disruption is truly creative in the positive sense, or some of it is just churning driven by financial factors.
Right. Are we genuinely building lasting value, or are we potentially caught in a cycle of malinvestment fueled by easy credit, which happens to manifest as rapid technological change with significant social costs? It really reframes the debate about whether this disruption is inherently good or necessary.
That's a heavy thought, questioning the very nature of the progress we're seeing. Okay, so given all these complex forces, AI's impact, polarization, the gig economy, maybe even questions about creative destruction itself, let's pivot to solutions. What can actually be done? How do we navigate this future?
It's the crucial question. We need to look at skills, policies, responsibilities, a multi-layered approach. Reports like the one from the International Organization of Employers, IOE, try to map this out.
What does that report say about AI's impact? Is it just job losses?
No, it's more nuanced. It talks about a threefold impact: displacement, augmentation, and creation.
Okay, break those down. Displacement, we understand.
Right. And generative AI expands the potential for displacement beyond just routine tasks, potentially touching administrative, creative, problem-solving roles too.
So a wider impact zone. What about augmentation?
This is key. AI boosting human capabilities. ILO research estimated maybe 13% of jobs could be boosted by AI, compared to only about 2.3% fully automated right now.
So AI as a co-pilot.
Exactly. Reducing tedious work, improving engagement, enhancing safety, like using AI to predict construction accidents. It's about making jobs better, not just eliminating them.
And creation. Are new jobs really emerging?
The IOE report says 50% of employers globally expect AI to promote job growth in the next 5 years. We're seeing demand for AI specialists, sustainability analysts, data analysts skyrocket, and totally new roles like prompt engineers, AI modelers.
Or it's a mix. Some jobs go, some change, some are created.
It's a dynamic churn, which leads directly to the skills question.
What skills will be most important if AI can do creativity and problem solving?
It's learning fast, yes. But the consensus seems to be that uniquely human social and emotional skills will remain crucial. Collaboration, empathy, conflict resolution, leadership.
The soft skills?
Precisely. Alongside digital skills, of course. Yeah. Basic digital literacy is essential for everyone. Intermediate skills for using advanced tools. And then advanced AI skills programming, data science for specialists. Demand for AI skills in job postings is already surging.
So upskilling and reskilling are vital.
Absolutely critical. CEOs recognize this. A huge majority believe their workforce needs new skills because of generative AI.
You also mentioned AI being used in HR and managing people.
Yes, increasingly. For hiring, screening resumes, performance management, identifying training needs, even conflict resolution. Some companies report significant efficiency gains.
But that raises ethical alarms, doesn't it?
Huge ones.
Yeah.
Data validity, privacy, the risk of algorithmic bias. If the AI learns from biased historical data, it can perpetuate discrimination in hiring or promotions.
Like gender bias.
Yes, or racial bias. It's a major concern. And the potential for misinformation, deepfakes, fake credentials generated by AI adds another layer of complexity for HR. Plus, the reliance on algorithms for decisions like layoffs.
I saw that stat. 98% of U.S. HR leaders would rely on algorithms for layoffs.
It's startling. It highlights the need for really careful ethical guidelines, transparency, and human oversight in how these powerful tools are used in the workplace.
Okay, so upskilling is key, but we also talked about the challenges of retraining earlier. Is it really a silver bullet?
That's where we need to be realistic. The Brookings report was quite cautious. Past evidence on large-scale retraining is, well, mixed is a polite word.
Why is it so hard?
Several reasons. Will there actually be enough high-skilled jobs for everyone displaced? Maybe not. Can everyone realistically reskill? Especially older workers or those facing other life challenges, cost, time, childcare. It's a huge burden.
And knowing what to retrain for.
Exactly. Predicting future labor market needs is incredibly difficult with AI evolving so rapidly. You risk training people for jobs that might disappear soon after.
And even when people do retrain, they might end up underemployed.
Some studies suggest that, yes, they might end up in lower paid service jobs despite their new skills. So retraining is part of the solution, but it's definitely not the whole answer.
So what else is needed? policy-wise?
A broader strategy. Internationally, you see efforts focused on human-centered AI principles, ILO, OECD, UNESCO, the G7 Hiroshima principles, setting global norms.
And closer to home.
Regionally, the EU AI Act is a major step. The first comprehensive legal framework, risk-based, banning certain high-risk applications like workplace emotion recognition.
Prohibiting some uses entirely.
Yes. Domestically, countries are developing national AI strategies, funding R&D, but also focusing on ethics, data protection, building expertise within government. It's a complex tapestry of responses.
Yeah.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, it really underscores that this requires shared responsibility. It's not just on governments or individuals. Businesses have a huge role.
What should businesses be doing?
Promoting innovation, yes, but also developing specific AI strategies for their workforce.
Yeah.
Investing heavily in skills development. That shocking stat that less than half of workers got AI guidance needs to change.
And the ethical side.
Critically evaluating ethical risks before deploying AI. Tackling bias, ensuring privacy, being transparent, and implementing real transition programs, retraining, redeployment, support for those whose jobs are changing or disappearing.
And governments, beyond funding retraining.
They need to focus on general risk mitigation, robust cybersecurity, strong data protection laws for workers, facilitating digital literacy across society, not just for specialists, and crucially, strengthening social safety nets, unemployment support, healthcare access to cushion the transition for affected workers.
It sounds like we might need more than just tweaking the existing system.
Perhaps. That Brookings piece also touched on rethinking the role of work itself. If traditional jobs become scarcer for many, how else can people contribute meaningfully?
To community life, care work.
Exactly. Expanding our definition of value beyond purely economic output tied to a traditional job. Thinking about how to support diverse forms of contribution in a future where human skills like empathy and community building might become even more paramount.
This deep dive has really shown us that the future of work isn't just about faster machines or new apps. It's about fundamental shifts in wealth, opportunity, and the very definition of what it means to be employed. We've seen how a seemingly stable profession like radiology can face that crimson tide, how middle-class jobs are experiencing this profound hollowing out, and how the gig economy presents this whole new landscape of challenges and maybe some opportunities for workers.
Yeah. And we even question that comfortable idea of creative destruction, asking if it's always as positive as it's made out to be.
Yeah.
Indeed. The data really does point towards increasing wealth concentration, and our go-to policy tools like retraining, while important, they clearly face significant hurdles and limitations on their own.
Right.
And it's become so clear that while AI offers just immense potential for productivity, maybe even for making jobs better through augmentation, it absolutely demands rigorous ethical thought in how it's built, how it's deployed, especially in those really sensitive areas like hiring, managing people.
It's not just an economic calculation.
Not at all. It's deeply societal. It touches everything.
Ultimately, we're talking about more than just jobs, aren't we? We're talking about dignity, opportunity, maybe the very fabric of our society.
Yeah.
The transition ahead with all its disruptions, all its innovations. It isn't just about what the machines can do. It's really about what we decide to do with them, how we shape the rules, the policies, the ethics.
We are absolutely at a pivotal moment. The choices we make now will shape the world of work and society for generations.
Imagine a future, though, where productive contribution means more than just a 9-to-5 job.
Right, where building community, providing care, pursuing creative endeavors, things humans excel at are truly valued and supported.
Supported by strong safety nets, maybe different economic models.
And underpinned by a real collective commitment to developing and using technology ethically and for broad human benefit. That's the future we need to strive for.